Hey everyone, I'm Dane Sanders and I want to welcome you to Better Together in whatever city you're in. This is a monthly conversation that is literally happening all over the world. You are participating in a movement. It's not just a photo club or a gathering of creative people just to hang out or to listen to a speaker. In fact, this video is a real minor part of the real business of what you guys are up to, and the leaders who take a stand for your town are heroes to me. They're the people who stand up and say it's more important. We actually believe that we're better together than we are in isolation, and they mean it by their actions. They don't just say it with their words. And I hope tonight's conversation and this little kickoff video will really be supportive of that effort. Now, if you've been around the Better Together conversation for the last few months, you've heard me talk a lot about things like change and how change works, and if you feel stuck and change isn't happening, why that is the case. And if you've read my book, Fast Track Photographer, at least the revised edition, the last chapter is a whole section where it outlines all that information. And 2 months ago, I did a video that really emphasized what those distinctions were and how you can begin to break down and find out with real precision and explanatory power why you're not seeing the results that you were looking for. And if you want a refresher on that, feel free to talk with your colleagues in the room. Again, I think you're better together than you are in isolation, and these folks have a lot of resource available to you. Last month, we extended the conversation around change and talked a lot about the nature of relationships and how you're relating with things and people, and how you want to create a highest and best use scenario where you are relating appropriately in a real way, in a way that you were made to relate with things and people, everything from clients to close friends and family, from equipment that you might purchase to accounts payable and receivable in your business. That there's a way to actually relate with these things in a way that's true and has integrity with yourself and what you're committed to. Now this week, we're going to make another jump, going from change to the kinds of relationship you have. Today I want to talk a little bit about really why we're doing Better Together in the first place. Another section of one of the two books, I talk about the difference between do-it-yourself and do-it-together. And there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers in the world right now. In fact, it's a DIY nation, it seems like, or international space right now where everybody wants to do it yourself. And I'm of the belief that especially if you're going to do something professionally and when you're sitting under the weight of all of the different tasks that you need to accomplish as a professional in the creative fields, it's pretty overwhelming to be everything all the time. In fact, I think it's nearly impossible. In the early days of the internet, there were people who could jump on, and it felt so freeing because everybody had a chance to do something. They could, if they wanted to make websites for people, they could. The challenge is when the stakes got raised and everybody could play, well, the real players showed up and they started creating websites at an entirely different level that you or I couldn't pull off unless you happen to be a genius in that category. Well, it's no different in photography. It used to be that photography was only available for the elite few. And then when it became ubiquitous and everybody everywhere was a photographer, for a moment it was very exciting because for some of you and myself to even have access to photography that wasn't available. And then all of a sudden it was. And anybody, in a sense, could start a photo business. But now the stakes have been raised. Because everybody can play, the level of play now to be successful is at a whole new level. It's no longer low-hanging fruit. And do-it-yourself photographers, and I'm a big fan of a lot of DIY photographers. One of my favorites is a guy named Amit Gupta over at Photo Jojo. I love that culture, and as an enthusiast and as an amateur, it's great. You still get to be a DIY. But when it comes to being a pro, doing it together is a whole different game. It's a mandate now. It's not just an option. So we're going to talk a little bit about doing it together, and you're going to talk about this way beyond my video with the group. Like, what is it that you think needs to be done together? Is this premise of being better together so important, or is it really just kind of a touch point for you to kind of check in and maybe show off what you've been up to and then network and then leave and go do it on your own again? My take is that if you're human, you need each other. You need the support system. You need a positive culture and ethos that'll support what you're up to as a business. And it's why we're doing this Better Together thing in the first place. So that's my assertion. So part of your conversation tonight is going to be around, well, is that true? Do you actually believe that? And does that show up in the results in your life? And if it's not true, or if there's areas in your life where it's not true, how could you incorporate things like the law of change, or like the four corners of the relational universe, and use those as tools to unlock what's possible together? What could you do as a group that hasn't been done up until now? And I'd encourage you to really lean into the conversation led by your leaders and see what could open up. So that's the first part of it. The second part of what I want tonight to be about, if you're open to it, is to really wrestle with this idea called the Golden Circle. And the Golden Circle is not my idea. A guy named Simon Sinek came up with it, and it's very famous now. If you Google Simon Sinek or the Golden Circle, you'll find this very quickly. It's a TED Talk that he gave, where he talked about 3 concentric circles that point to something very important. And this will come full circle and relate to what I just mentioned about doing it together, the DIT culture we want to create here at Fast Track and Better Together. Now, if you picture an outer circle, and then a circle inside of that, and then a circle inside of that, the outer band, I want you to consider that what you do. It's your what. And in photography, our what is pretty evident for most of us. We know what we do. We generate leads, all the way through to taking somebody's picture, all the way to selling product and service, and ultimately having those clients be so happy that they go out and get more clients on your behalf that are now leads. That part we get, okay? And in the future months, we'll be talking about the specifics of breaking that down a little bit more. But I think in general, in theory, most people understand that. The second band in the circle is how you do it. And a lot of you, if you're like a lot of Better Together groups out there, especially if you're newer, or if you remember back when you were first starting out, you got what needed to be done. But you didn't know all the details of how to do it, and you show up at a place like Better Together in the hopes of getting access to that. And that's important. It's really important that you understand how you do it. But the real goal, the centerpiece of it all, is probably the most neglected. And Simon Sinek is brilliant to have addressed it so elegantly when he said, look, it's your why. You know what your what is, you know what your how is, but very few people know what their why is. And what's remarkable is if you start with your why, figuring out what and how it needs to be done becomes really self-evident because your why demands it. And I wonder what tonight could look like for you, if this could be a pivot point in your business, if you were to pause for a second and in a risky way, in a transparent way, in a vulnerable way, take some risks with each other and get in some conversation around what your why might be. You can change your why later if you want, but if you can make the primary task tonight to leverage Better Together or do it together in the context of this conversation around what your why is, I think you're going to have a really rich moment tonight. And I hope you take advantage of it, and I hope you get your pen out, and I hope you write it down, and I hope you make some declarations. Because the third part of our video tonight is around reaping and sowing. Now, reaping and sowing is a core principle of what humans do. If you are in a situation right now where you're looking at your life, and maybe you did this 2 months ago when we talked about change, but you look at how your business is showing up right now, and you don't like the results. You would prefer something different. You're hungry for change. You're itchy. You just want something new to show up in your life. And if that's not happening yet, what I want to suggest to you is, in large measure, most of the time, you are reaping right now. You're harvesting right now what you sowed into historically. So whatever you did back there got you to here. And what I want to suggest to you is, if you want to go there, to a new place, to something that's in line with your vision, in line with your why, it begins with what you do today. And I need to let you know, I've been really challenged in this category lately. A lot of you know I'm a big fan of Seth Godin. He's been a bit of a mentor to me, and he's been very kind to me over the years. And I've been amazed. In fact, by the way, if you ever have a chance to go back and see the video of him being interviewed on Fast Track Coaching, I would really encourage it, because he's outside of our industry and he really has some really unique perspectives on what we're doing. But one of the things that I've been learning from Seth is this idea of patience, And I have found that in a lot of conversations that I've been privileged to be in around Better Together, there's just a lot of people who are impatient. They're feeling desperate and scarce. They're looking ahead and they're thinking, oh my goodness, I don't just need to make money with my photography. I need to do it like now. Like really, no kidding, we're in real trouble. And I want to suggest to you that I have good news and bad news with that. The bad news is, well, if you really do need the money right now, you are in trouble if you haven't done something back there to get a new result here. Because the nature of this business is such that it isn't quick money. You can take ground quicker than you think, but there isn't a magic trick. There's no silver bullet that I'm aware of that will automatically give you clients. And even if you had clients, that will give you the infrastructure or the systems that you need to make those clients so happy that they spend a lot of money and you know you're living the big life. I want to suggest to you that the big life is a more patient enterprise where it begins with current reality, where you're at today, and future vision, where you want to be tomorrow, how you want a harvest to come your way, and that the process of starting with now, what is currently here, and we talked about this a few months ago actually, current reality and future vision, what is here right now, and what do I want out there, to name those things with specificity, to make some declarations. If you're unfamiliar with what I mean when I say a declaration, I'd encourage you to have some candid conversations with your leaders, because they're very familiar with declarations, especially if they went to any of the road shows. But making a declaration and saying out loud, this is where I'm at, and that's where I want to be, is part of developing your why. It's part of naming what you're committed to. And as you get clear on here and there and why I want to get from here to there, why that's important to me, what you're going to find is some fuel rising in your chest. You're going to have a sense of passion and drivenness, a sense of dissatisfaction with the status quo in combination with your vision and in combination with, gosh, if only you knew what one thing you needed to do next. I have a hunch you'd go do it. You'd be motivated. You'd find the fuel. And I would argue that tonight you are sitting in the midst of an amazing array, even if it's two of you, an amazing array of resource that you could tap into right now if you took a risk and they took a risk and you really went all in the conversation. What could open up for you to not only find the single next step that's required, but to take action with it? I've been really compelled lately that this idea of being patient and implementation, drip, 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 single task after single task after single task, over a long view where it's not just, man, what can I get done this year, but what could I get done in 2 years if I worked faithfully this year? That kind of patience can yield a remarkable return compared to the folks that are in a sense of scarcity and are just trying to get a whole bunch of stuff right now. And if you have that long view, what's great is you will reap what you sow. You will kind of feel the sense of what is required of you to be the kind of person whose way of being generates that kind of return. Now, for me, I know I've been really convicted lately around generosity. I want to be a more generous person. And I have a mentor in my life, a coach in many ways, who is no stranger to confronting me on things. And I shared it with him that I want to be someone who is reaping generosity. And it needs to begin. But he suggests is, what am I sowing into? How am I sowing generously? And what that meant was when I had something that would surprise me, some money that came my way or whatever, it doesn't have to be money, it could be time, it could be a whole bunch of things. How willing was I to give that away for the sake of not getting some kickback or some commission or some affiliate sale, but just a sense of me becoming a more generous person. If I would sow into that, I would get that in return. And that was really compelling to me. An example he gave was that he had just recently, this is my mentor speaking, had just recently lost a lot of weight. He'd lost like 20 or 30 pounds. And he turned to me and he said, Dane, I have the secret. I know how this thing works, and I want to tell you. And he lowered his voice and was very dramatic. And he said, this is how weight loss works. If you eat less, you lose weight. And of course, I laughed, like some of you might be laughing right now, as if we don't know this. But it's amazing how un-rocket science this whole process is. If I want to reap something down the line, it isn't that complex often when I just chunk it down into bite-sized steps of what needs to be done. And I just need to go and do it. I need to implement. I need to take action. And that's what he did. Well, tonight that's the case for you. I should mention too that for him, he didn't stop eating cake. He didn't stop eating bad things. He just ate less of it. And when his body told him it was full and his lips said, I want more, he told his lips to be quiet so that he could get what he ultimately wanted. And that kind of discipline, that rhythm, day in, day out in the context of community, guess what that yields? Well, of course, it yields a harvest of a life that I know you're craving and I know I'm craving too. So that's where I'm leaving tonight's conversation there, so that you guys can begin to, again, to practice this habit as a community of people who are in it together. I was tempted to say in it to win it, but it sounded too idle-ish. But if you're familiar with the U.S., it's a TV show here. But you get my point that you're committed to doing it together right here, right now, tonight. And that you're going to begin to declare what is the current reality, the resource that you have available to you right here, right now. And how will this relate to where you want to be down the line, what you're going to reap as a harvest? And how willing are you to go in together as a community right now to go in that direction together? And as you get into the nuts and bolts and leaders and group, whatever city you're in, don't let people off the hook. Have the fierce conversation. Speak into people's lives in a way that's resourceful, that's truth-telling, that is constructive and supportive, that isn't just there to beat people up, but is saying, look, if you need to do work on your craft, you can say it constructively. And you could say, if your vision is to get better, well, guess what you need to do? You need to practice. If you want to spend less money, well, you need to, tighten your belt. If you want to make more money, well, you're going to have to get in front of some people and provide incredible value where they're going to want to give you more money than the product you're giving out the door, because they value the product so strongly. And you begin to see these correlations. So even as I'm talking, I suspect some of you are like, oh my gosh, I've never thought of it in this kind of way. And it's not rocket science. Now, some of you have heard this before, and you're still not happy with the results, reaping and sowing, and you want to go again. Well, tonight's your night too. So that's it for now. I'm going to pause the video for here, and hopefully you'll jump right into the conversation and get concrete and specific about what it is you want to see shifts happen with, and get after it. Looking forward to next month. I'd love your feedback. Please let me know at Dane Sanders on Twitter or at Fast Track Photo, of course. Jump on the Facebook boards. They're great too. But really, the people that are meeting in person, which is where you get access to these videos, you guys are the benefactors, because you're taking this idea better together so seriously. And I hope you do, and I hope you get the results that you're looking for. Thanks. We'll see you next time.